Hey, it's Robert Phoenix, and we're back for another edition of the Friday FARcast. I want to thank everybody who is currently here for being here, and we'll have a few more folks join us as the clock ticks and the chat begins to fill. Uh, Before I jump in and bring our esteemed guest of the day on, just a couple of pieces of business I wanted to take care of. So, all you people in the Southeast, I know a lot of you are in chat or would be in chat if you have power to be in chat right now. I hope that you're all navigating this turbulent meteorological experience that you're going through. And it's really interesting because yesterday we kind of looked at this astro weather wise, and in a lot of ways, it kind of panned out time wise. And I was following the storm all day, and I watched it go from a Cat 4 to a Cat 1. And I'm like, all right, this is not going to be full blown, hurricane, but it will cause some damage. I think that, and it's not over clearly, and a lot of power's out, but I do think that it could have been incredibly worse than what it actually has manifested to this point. So if you're out there, hang in there and use your internal navigational skills. Over on Twitter, I posted a picture. Maybe I could post it here really quickly because to me this is really. Let me do this. Hold on. To me, this is really high level. That's not it. High level awareness that this person exhibited, and I want to grab the right image here so I can bring it up. Give me 1 second here. And they're in North Carolina, where there was a fair amount of intense rain, wind, trees being uprooted, particularly on their property. And so what happened is that they here this is the image I want to show you right here. So what happened is that they had the intuition to move their vehicle, and they did, and this is what happened an hour later. So as you can see, this tree, they've been having a lot of trees falling and collapsing due to the fact that the root system is quite shallow and the ground is so damp. And these winds are so intense that they're literally being blown over. But as you can see, the back of the car got hit, and so the window is shattered. But if they had not moved that car an hour earlier, that tree would have basically totaled this vehicle. So I thought this is a really good example of paying attention to what's going on the outside and on the inside. So if you're still in that environment, just keep your situational awareness about you and don't freak out. And if you have an impulse or you have an intuition, follow it. And you can see where by doing this, they save themselves an incredible amount of damage and ultimately money and a lot of hassle. So I just wanted to say that it's not that they're like, this is a good thing. It's not a good thing, but it could have been a worse thing. And I also think that in some of these situations, we kind of get tested a little bit and we get to figure out, maybe we have some interesting superpowers that we're not always aware of. And it seems like situations like this bring it to the surface. So anyway, I just wanted to pass that along, and I hope everybody down there is doing well, or as well as you can be. And real quick, before we bring my buddy Mo on, I also just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of the show, and that's my guy, Chris at True Hemp Science out here in Austin. And you know the drill. You type in 15MINS and you will get a goodie bag with your purchase of $100 or more, and you're going to get some of the, you might get the Starlight gummies, you might get the Moonlight gummies. So you're going to get some cool things in your goodie bag. It's like an order on top of your order. And I guarantee you will like the product that you get both with your order and the goodie bag. $150, get you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. And you can always make an appointment online to talk to somebody at True Hemp Science to find out what the best product for your needs are. All right, let's do this. Let me give you a little bit of a background on my guy, Mo. Now that I remember it, we actually connected in 3D on the night of a very powerful storm, since we're talking about storms. And I was at the Mondo 2000 house, and I was talking with Queen Moo, and she kept telling me, you must meet Mo. You have to meet Mo. I think you would have a lot in common with him. So maybe, I don't know, about an hour I'm at this house, this big house and it's up in the hills, right? So it's not easy to get to, and it's raining hard. And this guy bikes up to the house, and it happens to be Mo. And on that day, it was the day of my dream spell signature, which was 13 Kaban. And I think he knew this somehow. If he didn't know this, he knew this anyway. And that's the first day that we met each other. And I believe that was in 1996. And we've known each other since then. And he's been on the show here a couple of times. And he's one of the most, how do I say this? He's one of the most intelligent, switched on, spiritual people I have ever met in my life. And I hold this man in high regard, high esteem and respect. We've been through many misadventures together, and I've learned so much from him throughout the years. And I'll tell you how ahead of the curve he was. At a certain point, one day he starts eating raw meat. And this might have been, I don't know, maybe 1998 or something like that. I can't be specific with the date. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And he's been a Carno, hardcore Carno ever since. And so let me just give you his coordinates here. You can find his work at deepshit.substack.com, wizardofwords.xyz. He's a writer. He's a deep thinker. He's was a body worker, and an exceptional one at that. And I just want to bring you in here and give an official greeting and welcome you to the show, Mo.
Robert, thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Yeah, you're welcome. So do you recall that night when you pedaled up there to Allison's house?
I do recall that night, and I did know what date it was. I hadn't met you yet, so I didn't know that it was your date.
Isn't that yeah? It makes sense though in some ways.
It did make sense, and that was like the only time that I'd ridden up there in months, and I just knew I couldn't sleep that night. Knew I had to be there to meet you.
And the conditions were howling.
Yeah, it was quite a apocalyptic night.
Yeah. So
Mondo was being evicted, and you were facilitating the move.
I facilitated a lot during those 3 years. I could write like half of my memoirs just based on those 3 years that you and I were in the center of the Mondo universe as it was imploding.
we might speak to that a little bit insofar, and then just name like, what was this thing? This thing was an organic version of Wired.
Yep.
That happened all of its own. It was on the cover of Time magazine at least twice, announcing that the internet was coming and it was going to change all our lives.
Yep.
And the woman at the center of it was just brilliant cultural no-scene. I mean, she knew everything about what was really happening before the internet happened. And she never put her fingers on a computer. Yeah, that's part of it. She got it all word of mouth and by reading.
exactly.
And she
And
ran this tech magazine, but didn't use computers.
yeah, it was so. For people that weren't aware of Mondo, it was way ahead of the cultural zeitgeist. You know, breaking people like William Burroughs and Jaron Lanier. It was this, you know, very interesting intersection between psychedelics, cyberculture, conspiracy theory. What am I missing, Mo? Is there anything else that art, like really bleeding edge graphics and art,
Cultural
um,
creatives, just
and
on
cultural
every channel.
creatives?
Yeah, on every
Yeah,
channel. And it
yeah,
had particular cred because the cultural creatives, the musicians, the artists, the filmmakers all knew this was a magazine by people who did drugs and who got it. And so they were extraordinarily open
yep.
with the staff, and we even let them design articles. I mean, our Red Hot Chili Peppers designing their own, you know, self-presentation with Rorschach tests. I mean, it just had lots of twists and turns, and tons of really turned on people were switched into it.
Yeah, I remember during that Nina Hagen issue, there was this group from, I think they were from Sweden. They were called Goose Goose.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, do you want, one of the guys in Goose Goose was a graphic designer. And I said, hey, we're doing this whole section on electronic music. Do you want to design it? And he said, sure. So, I mean, that's how this whole thing worked and came together. It was really unique, kind of anarcho, you know, creative generator. And then it did what it did, right? It did what it was supposed to do. It seeded the culture, and it was the, you know, the death of a dandelion, essentially. And we were there as the final spores were being blown to the wind, and we were trying to keep it together, right? I mean, you and I were really invested in this thing and trying to keep it together, but it you know, we it had its time and place,
Right.
right? And so we really were kind of we were on the hospice watch. That's what we were on.
I like the dandelion imagery that accurately gets it. I used to say that you and I were the last rats off the ship, and that Allison was Queen Moo was the ship.
She was the ship, and we were kind of the last rats off the ship.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. So anyway, that's a little bit of how we met, and we could probably spend the next 2 hours just talking about Mondo and, again, some of these misadventures. But we want to. The reason you're here today is because you reached out to me on my birthday, and we had a very quick but very salient, laser focused conversation. And I had brought up this idea that I had been railing against the black pill, and mostly because the black pill doesn't offer up many solutions. And it's like, okay, you can text harder, you can tweet harder. And to be fair, there are people out there that are trying to kludge together, you know, get off the grid and build it, or whatever they're working on. There are people that are trying to do this, and I applaud their efforts. I applaud, if you have the time, the energy, and the fortitude and the passion to do this, by all means, go do it. Go walk your talk. And so we started this conversation, and all of a sudden you start bringing some things up that are like, wow, this is really interesting. And it feels very time sensitive, and we should talk about it. So I don't know really where we start with all of this, but ultimately what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a number of ideas that Mo has thought through. And by the way, I have to make sure that I get his websites in here: deepshit.substack.com and wizardofwords.xyz. .xyz. So you can go there, and so these aren't just things that he's pulling out of his head and say, "Hey, I got a great idea." These are extremely well thought through and researched ideas that he's spent a lot of time putting together and kind of road testing in his brain. And I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but one of the things that you do professionally is that you're a grant writer. And because of that, you have gained considerable insight into some of these systems that we're going to talk about today. So it's not just having an airy fairy vision of what can be. You've found a way to kind of get inside the system a little bit and figure out what's working and not working as well. So is this a fair jumping off point?
This is a fine jumping off point.
Okay. So, all right, here we are, a country in a world in strife and division. At a certain point in time, the country was literally split in two by the 2017 eclipse, which started in Oregon and ended in Florida. It started at the 33rd state and ended at the 33rd degree parallel. And the conditions became, well, reflective of that, a country divided. Since then, we had another major eclipse last April, which cut the country in quarters. So now we're looking not just a house divided, but a house quartered and fractalized. So even if you were on one side before and on the other side before, that's become more complicated because your side probably got split in half as well. So we're really dealing with a very unique set of social circumstances and dynamics here in this country. Abroad, my heart goes out to the Europeans because they have basically been almost conquered over the last 10 years with unmitigated migration at levels that cannot be integrated. And we may not necessarily touch on that today, but this is part of a much broader picture. And so what we're going to address today is what can we do here and maybe perhaps in other places if you're listening in Australia or New Zealand or someplace in Europe. What can we do? What are some of the things that are available to us? And Mo's going to bring out some very interesting ideas. You may not agree with all of them, but let's give him the floor here, and let's roll this out. Mo, you got the mic.
Okay, let's start with the black pill situation. Although it's been slow in coming, and although we're the frogs in the pot, so we don't notice how the temperature is rising. We've been slowly isolated from one another for the last 14, 15 years. I mean, with digital technology, we've been rendered more autistic, meaning can't share perspective, can't communicate, can't cooperate, and we've focused our I want to say anima. We focused our spirits on these little devices instead of on our relationships with one another. And because of that, we're out of practice with cooperating in real time. And many of us are out of practice with empathy, with emotionally resonating with each other. And when it does happen, it's extremely transformative. I mean, it allows us to regain and recapture and reactivate these vast skill sets that have been lying dormant, and it seems that we're sort of like a pimple that's been being squeezed, for a number of years, and the pressure is finally getting to the point where it's going to pop, where we can no longer take more compression without dying. And there are tons of people who are dying, alienated and lonely, frustrated, unable to connect. And reversing that seems incidentally to mesh with some of our needs in the current crises. Right? Some of our current crises are financial. Um, our currency is being inflated at exceptional rates. I don't know if it's $25 trillion, $30 trillion over the last decade. It's just incredible how little our money is worth now because so much money has been printed, and we have real needs for correcting that, for finding ways of maintaining the value of what we have and of putting it to good use before it just disappears and is totally diluted away. And so, to connect the two ideas, the idea of isolation and the need for a re, a way of maintaining and transferring wealth, um, the two kind of can go hand in glove in reinvesting in our communities. And the way I understand to do that is through the blockchain, through local currencies and local investment. And we'll unpack that a bit more as we go. Um, I want to go just look at our financial crisis a little bit more for those who are not familiar with it. I mean, one of the pushes right now, and Robert, feel free to jump in at any point and illustrate this, is the push towards CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And when those happen, our financial freedom ends permanently. Basically, they can decide how we transact, and they can unplug us from the ability to transact completely. Not only can they take our money, they can say we can no longer use money. And that's a line in the sand that a lot of people are very fearful about, and rightly so. And having a channel for constructive action around that is really useful. And similarly, do you cover the Great Replacement Theory, the immigration thing on this show much? To folks,
Absolutely,
folks are
100%.
aware of that,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right? So we're in a situation where our governments are not protecting us or representing us in any way. They've basically signed on with a group of international professional predators and are managing us like any other assets. And because of that, very ulterior, very ruthless practices are going on. As Robert mentioned, I work in primarily agricultural grants, so I'm aware of some what's going on there. And there's this 30 by 30 program the UN has foisted on us. That's basically taking 30% of agricultural land out of use.
That's right.
By 2030, and paying people to take land out of use. And is this a coincidence that Bill Gates became the biggest landowner in the U.S. and you can now take land out of use and get paid for it? Doesn't seem so likely as a coincidence. Basically, that's how the whole green agenda works. You take land out of use and get paid for it. You get paid for creating oxygen or for capturing carbon. And that's how the new green economy works. So we're caught as people in the crossfire of that, in that we are being discouraged from having agriculture, and there we are, yeah, and of producing what we need, and also our energy infrastructure, um, energy production through coal, natural gas, oil, is being downscaled. So just like in Europe, where they closed a bunch of coal burning power plants, and then the price of heating and energy went up 1,000% in the winter a couple years back. If you were paying $300 for winter heat, you're suddenly paying $3,000 a month, and tons of people froze to death in highly civilized Europe. And this was before Nord Stream 2 was sabotaged. This was even before that. And so you had to choose between heating and eating. And the exact same thing is happening here. The big power plants are being closed down,
Hmm.
and we're going to an all electric economy.
Yep.
And we will face the exact same things they're facing in Europe: incredibly high energy prices, um, incredibly high food prices as food supplies are decreased, and also just tons of remote control technologies. Like the shift to electric vehicles means, you can be unplugged in your ability to travel.
Absolutely.
So what's needed is what I call an off ledger, or a different ledger investment channel for investing in our own infrastructure.
Okay. Can I put a pause there just for a second?
Sure, go for it.
Because I don't know if you can see this, but these are the 8 principles for
Yeah.
this 30 by 30. And if you really crack open the language, it sounds great on the surface, but if you crack it open and go a couple layers deeper, this is all about control, right? So, just a couple of them: pursue a collaborative and inclusive approach to conservation. Like, collaborate with who, right? And inclusive of what? Conserve America's lands and waters for the benefit of all people. What does that mean? That means, well, let's say the government says we're going to take over that land and we're going to take over that water, and it's for the benefit of the people, but is it really? Support locally led and locally designed conservation efforts. Who are leading these things locally? Probably 30 by 30 agents, right? I mean, when you use science as a guide, like, what the fuck does that mean? Of course, science has proven to be such a great tool over the last 4 years that we're just going to march right behind that one. So and they use words like conservation and stewardship atlas and mapping out the database, baseline information. And I mean, these all sound really great on the surface. And if you drill down, really drill down, you'll find that all these things are really just sort of contractual language that brings you into agreement for deeper control. And I just wanted to bring that up before because this is how they're framing it. And to people who are like quote unquote progressive or ecologically um, concerned and like nature and want to preserve things, a lot of these things sound great. But when you drill down and they're actually instituted, they're very different than the nice shiny headline or bullet point that they're given to you.
Just to back you up on this, there are two women who've done incredible work on this topic. And the first one, of course, is Rosa Corey, who wrote a book called Behind the Green Mask, who spells out exactly where they're going with all this and how it is not for all the people. It's for giving billionaires, access to the majority of America and putting America in these 20-minute cities, or whatever they are, 15-minute cities.
Right, right.
And the other is Elizabeth Nixon, Nickson, who was a writer for Harper's, and she has a great Substack, and she talks about the Rockefellers funded 990 environmental organizations in the past 30 years to operate at the local level and to be these so-called local partners
Exactly.
who are pushing this agenda. So
Exactly.
it's not grassroots in any way.
Yep.
There's nothing green about it. Just the same way that mainstream environmental groups have consistently suppressed the chemtrail story, which is the largest deliberate pollution incident in Earth's history, the dumping of hundreds of millions of tons of aluminum into the atmosphere and into all farmlands, including organic lands. There's a systematic repression of that. So to circle back to where we were, so there's this huge need for infrastructure here to resist what's going on, There's both a need for good places to invest, right? Cryptocurrency sounds great in theory, but in many ways, it's no different than the current Federal Reserve System in that you do not control the volume of the currency, and it's not linked to tangible assets,
Right.
right? So as long as you can't, the currency is not fixed to something solid, it can be inflated, and all the people holding it will lose value, will lose buying power. So what's needed is something with either a tangible item, could be goods or it could be services,
Right.
that whose volume is determined by the people using it. And unlike many cryptos where there are these vague administrators running the whole thing, the technology has come far enough along and is simple enough that setting up local cryptos is possible and pretty doable. And I would argue around that a few steps to the side in the dance are a good move. And those steps are, instead of doing crypto, do lusso. Lusso is transparent currency. And the advantage lusso has over crypto is that, number one, you can tell who's paying whom to do what. So you can see all transactions. So if the Rockefellers are paying your local environmentalists to push something, you can see the green trail. You can say, oh, that's why so-and-so is voting in that way. And you can make sure that that influence is crushed or removed. You can see who's corrupt. Plain trail. The other very interesting point is what I call the quality bit. Currently money has just a quantity bit. You can see how much it is, but not where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a lusso currency, it can be commented, like your transactions on Facebook or Amazon or eBay. So when you transact with a certain seller, you can leave feedback. And that allows you to say, this guy screwed me. And if enough people leave that message, you can see someone's reputation before you do business with them.
Right.
And in our current economy, and it's an economy that's been thousands of years in the making, the people who lie, steal, kill, and enslave others accumulate the most money. And in this transparent economy, only those who help others will succeed, because everyone can see what everyone's doing, and we'll all gravitate to the ones who are helping each other.
Right. Right. It's kind of like the relationship I have with Uber or Lyft. And I'm always, I just use Lyft, whatever. But when I get a ride, I always give the person the highest review, and I always tip them really well, because when I want a ride, people will want to pick me up, because they have their own version of me as a customer profile. And so, like, hey, they get there fast and they get me to where I want to go. So I completely understand this from that level alone.
That's a great detail to know about. Yeah. It's the same way with Airbnb. You got a rating as a guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you mess up, if you don't play respectfully, options become closed to you.
What's interesting about this is that this is like the doppelganger of the social credit score, right? But it's being interpreted in a completely inverted way. And it's truly like a human credit score that isn't based on the things that you aren't supposed to do in society. It's rewarding in a very different way. I like this idea. I think it's great.
Good. I mean, there's a tendency to want to hide And that's what crypto is about. It's like, I don't want people to know what I'm doing. You know,
Even the word cryptos always creep me out.
it creeps me out too. But what we're doing here is we're restoring meritocracy. And a meritocracy is an economy where good things get valued and bad things don't, and bad things disappear. And so you have to have a way of measuring it, to show that what you're doing is good. And instead of having some faceless overlords or algorithms deciding what your social credit score is, it's redistributed to the people around you, actual people. You have to actually do good in this system in order to make money. If you're not offering anyone anything good, you're going to starve to death. But if you are offering something good, people will network with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is very Aquarian, by the way.
Well, that's where my North Node is.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I mean, this is like, to me, truly Aquarian versus arbitrary Aquarian, and like the sort of the corporate communitarian version of Aquarian. This is the true shit right here.
Good deal. Glad that's resonating. Yeah. Well, the good news about much of this, and we'll keep going with it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the financial piece is only one. I mean, having a new law and having a new social contract is part of it too, really. And we started this conversation talking about isolation and autism. And there's an interesting sort of workaround for that. I mean, we may not know our neighbors and we may be ashamed or shy about going and talking to them. But if we see something in an app, we'll connect through the app.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have no problem hooking up on dating apps.
Yeah.
And it would be a similar thing if we had something like a help app,
Mm-hmm.
where if someone needed help, they would either create a long-term or a short, medium-term help app, help ad. Like, I need help with this, and people in the network could say, "Oh, I'll help you with that." And this is my background. Or they could have an immediate help ask. And I think that that's where this system really shines, is if you have people in a network, digitally networked, who are all listening to each other's cries for help, suddenly the positioning and leveraging of power shifts.
Right.
Like, if you hit if let's say I live in a small red town, right? I just moved from one. Let's say we're all networked, right? We all got our phones and we all got the app. If I see Child Protective Services roll into my driveway to come take my kids, I hit the button, and in 5 minutes there are 30 armed people at the end of my driveway saying, "You're not taking their kids." It's the same thing with forced medical treatments. If you can call up a flash mob of supportive people whenever you need to, the current law enforcement paradigm totally collapses.
Yeah, this is great. I love it.
Good. Yeah. So the challenge becomes, how do you incentivize this? First, how do we come up with a shared group of agreements that make all this work? And a lot of this stuff is available through Telegram,
Which has been unfortunately compromised now. I'm sure you're well aware of this, but
here's the deal.
Yeah.
I'm aware of what's happened,
right.
but I believe that Pavel Durov is just brilliant. He's a man of very pure heart. He's a man of at least centimillions and possibly billions, who owns nothing. He has no home. He has no yacht. He has no plane. He just lives to make this great human renewal app, basically.
Right. Right.
And yes, it's true that governments can make requests for information now, and Telegram is more likely to honor those requests. But the functionality of the family of apps is such that you can have a private group
Hmm.
that is not listed and cannot be tracked in any way.
So embedded inside of Telegram.
It's embedded inside of Telegram. So in the scenario we were just talking about, I can go and create a private group and manually add people to it. I can
Hmm.
manually add my personal help network to it.
Hmm.
And those people can all message each other and there's no trace of it anywhere. Right?
Well, I'm assuming that's correct. Yes.
So when the bad guys show up to do bad things, they don't know, who's at the end of the driveway, and they don't know how we're connected.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a very potent tool that way, and it contains a
So
crypto.
what you're saying is that if
Yeah.
you go enough layers deep in real time, that it would be very difficult for um, interlopers or the powers that be to get anywhere near that level of response. So that's essentially what you're saying, right?
What I'm saying is that it's surveillance opaque.
Okay.
It can't be penetrated the way that they're penetrating everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So you were gonna talk about the crypto function.
Well, the crypto function is that's currently there allows you to buy tone coins. Their company is called coin is called TON. I think it's the One Network or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can both transact without transaction fees, and you can convert it to whatever cryptos you want and pay out to your private wallet.
Mm-hmm.
So the mechanism for the underground economy is there.
So the infrastructure is there.
The infrastructure is there. The missing piece, and it's fairly simple, is to decide on what your local valuation is going to be and keep a ledger of that. And I have some ideas about who to contact and set up that app with. I've not succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk a minute just about blockchains and ledgers. What these things are is they're a way to keep track of transactions that cannot be falsified or coerced, because you've got a bunch of different people keeping track. So just because you're a member of the network doesn't mean you can go in and change things. And there are no administrators who can go in and change things. Janet Yellen cannot change your balance. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And the whole system is highly redundant, meaning that there are copies of it on every member's machine, or parts of it on every member's machine. So it's possible to keep track of a banking system, an entire banking system, on only a couple megabytes on people's phones and computers. And the way it would work in personalizing or grounding the system is that every time you transact, both people involved would enter the same thing, and that would signify a legitimate transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that transaction would then be validated and could be tagged before, during, or after. Tagged,
Mm-hmm.
meaning commented, saying, "Oh, this went really well for me," or, "Oh, no, dude sold me a box full of rotten fish," depending on what happened.
Okay, so what would happen if, and I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway.
Sure.
So, what would happen if the system was infiltrated by people who would say, dude sold me a bag of rotten fish, but he didn't really sell the guy a bag of rotten fish. Like he actually sold him something of value and worth. But you would have people inside the system who would try to manipulate the goodwill or the human credit score. Do they have a limited shelf life? What's the check and balance for somebody like that who could be very manipulative with inside the system?
Well, it's sort of like what you described with Uber, in that it's because it's an open commenting system.
Right.
The person who sold the fish could say, "No, I sold them good fish," and be on the watch for this guy. He's a scammer, and whoever's got more cred will eventually win.
Right.
And
So the
people,
the resolution of dispute would be based on historical evidence.
well, now we're getting into other territory, which is
Right.
it's good. We're going to get there.
Okay. It's my Virgo, man. I just got to go there. Right?
I'm glad you got to go there. I know maybe there's a little Scorpio in there too,
A little bit.
trying to do its thing. The simplest possible legal system I could come up with has sort of three tiers, and it's sequential.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, so basically, I agree. I will not harm, compel, coerce, or restrict anyone. That's what we all agree to.
That's an agreement. That's a contract. So when you
It's
enter
the
into the
contract.
app, you check that box.
And the second part to it is I will reply. I will respond to calls for help. I will enforce the law. That's my responsibility.
Okay.
And the third is I will respond in ways that de-escalate. So the contract has got those four: no harming, no compelling, no coercing, and no restricting. And they are the layers of rights that we have. So if I'm harming someone, I lose all four rights. If I'm actively harming something, my right not to be harmed has been surrendered. Or if I'm actively compelling someone, if I'm forcing someone to do things, my right to not be forced has been surrendered. If I'm just coercing someone, I can't be harmed or compelled, but I can be coerced.
Mm-hmm.
And the only person who really has unrestricted ability in this system is someone who's not harming, compelling, or coercing anyone else.
Right. That makes sense.
Right. So in the case of scammers or people who harm others, there is not a formal settlement mechanism because no one has more power than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit like how things used to be, at least here in Oregon, where if you act in a sociopathic way, people will check you.
Right.
They will get together and stop you.
Right.
Right. There's no hiding.
Right.
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 And people respond to being screwed in very various ways. Assuming that you're going to get away with it is not something you can do. Right. Very quickly, people will redefine what's going on here. If you hurt people, people say, God, that's a really bad, dangerous dog. It needs to be put down.
Yeah.
And and that doesn't sound very polite or civilized.
It sounds fine to me.
But it really, it resets the social contract, just like they say in Texas.
At some point, you got to have hard stops along the way.
An armed society is a polite society.
Yeah.
You got to have hard stops. You got to have a good no. You
Yeah.
got to have boundaries.
Exactly.
And this really resets those boundaries. So I'm not so worried about the scammers, especially if like the incentives for participating are so great.
Okay, so let's take it out of the realm of malevolence and manipulation. Let's just say it's an open dispute about the transaction,
Yeah.
and one person is convinced that their side of the story is the right one. How does this get resolved? Is it just through the negotiation of the two parties? Do other people chime in? Like, does the parameters of the system that you set up ultimately kick in and it resolves itself based on all those things that people have consented to?
Well, there is no formal enforcement or moderation process.
Right.
But anyone can call for help at any time. So anyone could say, "Hey, I really need help settling this." And 5 or 10 people in the community may step forward and say, "I'll help you settle this." And somebody may know the guy who thinks he was screwed and explain to him, "Jim, the fish were fine," or explain to the guy selling fish, "Hey, you had those in the freezer for 3 days, and it was out of ice. There's a chance that was not good fish." Some things will not be perfectly resolved, and there will be big question marks in it. But people with question marks in their profile will become less desirable to transact with.
Right.
So there's a strong mechanism to self-police and make sure you're clean.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to figure out, like, because we live in a very human world and not everybody agrees on their experience. And so I just wanted to sort of, road test that and see what that looked like in this model. And I think you have a pretty good explanation. And I like the fact that you're drawing back into the community. Hey, I need some help here resolving this. And so it actually contributes to some very interesting novelty in some ways, because you could have also relationships build out of that interaction. So that's cool. I like that.
Absolutely. And what interactions like that do is they help us identify where the resources are in our communities. Like,
that's a great point.
Yeah. We're so isolated now. We don't know who has what skills, but the more we interact, the more we know. Oh, that's the guy. I'd really get that lady in here. She's such a good peacemaker.
Right.
And all those skills become in demand and salable.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it. So now you're talking about, because you and I had this discussion off when you called me on my birthday, and it was about skill sets. And there are people who have hard skills. They can build you a fence, they can repair your generator, and this is a great example of a soft skill where somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'm really good at working through this stuff with people," and I love it. I love it. So there's room for, because when I think about like going off grid or creating like an off grid community, I think most people think, well, we're going to need people with all these hard skills, right? And of course, you're going to need soft skills in a community like that. But there tends to be, in my experience, just coming from the tech world, right? In the tech world, the engineers were at the top of the hierarchy because they had the hard skills, right? And the people that were the soft skill people were valued, but in the beginning stages of Silicon Valley, it was those hard skill people that were the ones that were not only in demand, but they also occupied a certain space in the organization, right? And so I can see where that would translate into people who could build shit or repurpose electronics or whatever. Those would be highly valued people But if you have this thing set up in a way where that person that you just mentioned can do things like that, and the soft skills are representative, I think that's great. And it feels, I hate the word because it's cheap, but it feels inclusive, right?
It
It
is inclusive, and it
Yeah.
also it maximizes social evolution because those who figure out how to do things harmoniously and constructively get a huge productivity boost,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, part of the divide and rule or divide and conquer system is that we're trapped permanently in fear, suspicion, and competition.
Yeah.
And we are, because of that disposition, we're not able to successfully cooperate. And we talked about replacement theory and the intentional bringing in of populations that are not able to cooperate with the existing ones because they don't share the same language.
Right.
This is so old school. I mean, this was done in the Caribbean. As soon as the Native Americans of the Caribbean and the Africans began to cooperate, the slave traders brought in Indians from India to break up the Union. The Romans were specialists at this too.
The Romans wrote the manual on this.
God. You know, and
Yeah.
this is not to say what's happening now is good or bad. What this is to say that it would be extremely wise to develop integration strategies for being inclusive with whoever is around, whatever human resources are around. You know, if suddenly there are a lot of military age foreign men around, it would be really good to incentivize them to get on our side.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and to provide an opportunity structure.
Yeah. I've always thought
Yeah.
that people respond to a better deal.
Yep.
And if you can just give them a better deal, and have the wherewithal to execute on that deal, it's a game changer.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit the other day. Like, this is a fine system that we're discussing, and it's very applicable and useful. And there are these global technologies of mass destruction that can, wipe out small communities with weather or with directed energy or,
Drones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drones, droughts, freezes, power outages.
Right.
So the only long-term solution to that sort of Damocles over our head is to give all those people a better deal.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want to put on your white plastic armor and work for the empire, or do you want to come hang out with people who party? You want to hang out with people who love you up and appreciate you and make sure you get fed and make sure your skills are put to good use, or do you want to be in this, very tight robot army working for the man? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you could say, hey, we've got the best tasting cats in our community.
I watched that video, by the way. Meow, meow, meow. I'm not just saying that for our.
You know what that is? You know what that video? You know what that video is? That video is the fulfillment of Mondo 2000. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like, it's got some plunderphonic in it. Yeah. It's got some postmodern stuff going on in it. It's got electronics in it, and it sort of is responding to the pulse of the moment. Um, it feels very Mondo-esque in a lot of ways.
It
So
does. It felt very Burning Man to me too.
it's and very Burning Man as
Yeah,
well.
you just
Yeah,
get up on the stage and do your things, and people are like, "Oh, this is great."
that thing is like probably up 7 million views or something like that now.
If you want to put the link up for people who haven't seen it too.
Oh, but trust me, these people have seen it.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So we're all right. We're all right. So if there is the inability to make a better deal, and there is the inability to integrate, because I don't think it's always going to be that easy. Some groups may be more compelled to integrate than other groups. Um, Even with the best deals on the table, then of course the community can respond in a very different kind of way.
sure. I guess the focus I would make here is that you run this system whether or not it's appealing to other groups,
Right.
because it creates the greatest possible integrity in your community and ability to resiliently respond to whatever is thrown at you.
Right. Right.
Right.
Let's talk about the idea that you brought up when we were discussing this. You loosely termed this transaction lusso, based on lucid, and the idea on a local scale is that people would get X amount of lusso. Can you explain that and break that down for people?
Well, I can and I will, though I'm not resolved yet on exactly how it plays out.
So you haven't. This is another part of the model you're still working on.
It's definitely part of the model I'm still working on.
Okay, so you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but it was to me it was like, okay, this is the starting point. This is where people have the foundational blocks to um, the blockchain that they're using in order to transact.
Well, I'll give you two starting points, and
Okay.
maybe one of your listeners will come up with the synthesis. I mean,
Okay.
this is an open source project.
Right.
So on the one hand, we have this massive global economy that has created wealth by killing, stealing, and enslaving people for thousands of years. And the wealth has accumulated with the greatest perpetrators. And
Right.
they have the greatest number of dollar votes in the system. They can buy whole governments. They can buy international organizations. They can buy whole industries. If they feel like it, they can buy every house on the market between $100,000 and $300,000, which
Yep.
BlackRock and Vanguard just did in the last couple of years.
Yep.
The amount of leverage is extreme. And what we have is the majority of people either are in debt or have been kept perpetually impoverished by this predatory economy that's been running.
Right.
Well, we could, by establishing local blockchains, we could just ignore that whole ownership structure entirely. We could say we're no longer honoring that, and we now assign 3 million or 5 million lussos to everyone here, and we have enough money to transact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really as simple as just creating the bills in an account. I mean, are your folks familiar with G. Edward Griffin and the creature from
Oh yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So as we know, the way things are currently done, whenever someone takes out a loan, the banks actually get that loan added to their balance books.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take out $300,000 to build a house, they didn't have that money before, but because they're loaning me the money, they get to add that to their reserves. I mean, that's the magical thinking.
Wow, man. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for 50 years
Yeah.
or more. So what we're doing is not so radical, just saying, oh no, you're a human, you're an adult, you're alive, here's your $3 million. You've met the criterion.
Right.
Now, the second way to do this, and it's slower, but I sense that there's an interplay between the two poles, so we'll name it anyway. And that is to start this whole system off by using the help app and assigning value to the help you receive.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. Because maybe I'm just being too puritanical here, but there does seem to be some need to attach that 3 million to something of value, whether it's a skill or help or fill in the blank. Maybe you don't have to, but I feel like for an ongoing system, it needs to be tied to something, whether it's human capital or something else.
I agree with you. And the issue, once the thing starts running, the only way you're going to get paid is by offering something of value to someone else.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's it's sort of a economic democracy insofar as everyone has the same number of votes to start with.
Right.
Those who do good things for others keep increasing their powers, and those who don't steadily lose it.
Right. That's the incentivization. Just be a better human.
Be a better human. Do good shit for people, and
Yeah.
it could work where people get a smaller amount to start, but every time you help someone, they can add money to your account for the help that you give.
Yeah.
The
You know what I love? I'm sorry. You know what I love about this is that it's not just the accumulation of something that you can ultimately use for a good or a service, but it's also a tool for consciousness. And I think that a lot of times with money, we've been so disconnected from that. And I think this is a really interesting blend of the two. And I think this is brilliant.
Well, it seems like it's just a reflection of natural law. It's just a manifestation of karma, really. It's what some of us operate in anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And here there's not quite a 3D replicable sort of rendering of that, but it's close.
Yep.
Yeah, I like it. It's cool.
The piece that really interests me, and again, this is one of the areas I'm still figuring it out because we haven't. Individual communities will have to figure out how they assign this lusso and how much they have. But we're in a situation here where the dollar may be radically devalued soon.
Yeah.
And so people want to get out of dollars. Once you have this lusso system set up, people can take their existing money, their empire money, and go and either buy capital goods that they're going to use for their local currency businesses, or valuable products like go to Trader Joe's and drop $5,000 on food, and then come back to your community and sell it for locals. It allows a transition from one economy to the other.
Let me ask you if you've thought about this.
Sure.
Because I've thought about it a lot.
Yes.
And I would love to see this model be reflective of supporting people to be healthier. So let's say, for instance, I'll use the word, you're obese, you weigh 350 pounds, right? But if you can get in shape, drop the weight because it's going to be healthier for you, you'll be less of a drag on the community and the system, that you can be incentivized for something like that. And how have you ever thought about that? Because I think it's kind of an important thing, right? Like incentivizing people towards health, not shaming them and saying you're fat, you're overweight, you eat shitty food, right? But here's what we're going to do. We're going to reward you for hitting these certain goals because you'll be healthier, and as a result, we'll be healthier. Have you factored that in at all? That's the Virgo in me kicking in.
Well, it's interesting. I shared a lane at the pool with a guy who was probably 400 or 500 pounds yesterday.
Yeah.
And
Well, he can float. We know that.
he can, and he was out there swimming and doing the best that he could
Right.
to rehabilitate his body. And my takeaway from interacting with him, he actually reached out to me. I was kind of being a bad boy. There were all the lanes had people in them, so I was swimming in the deep water exercise area, and suddenly there were people in the deep water exercise area. I couldn't swim laps anymore. I just kind of stood up and stopped, and he said, "Hey, come on over here." And you're welcome. And I, was grateful to him. And I think that the incentive,
You'd have to be careful with that with your system. It would be like he did not follow the rules. He was swimming in the deep end just because he wanted to swim by himself.
well,
We're
no,
we're gonna mark him down. No, I'm just
no,
kidding.
the system doesn't restrict anybody.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
If you're
messing
not
around.
hurting anybody, there's
Right.
no blood or foul. Anyway,
Right.
yeah. So
Right.
so my sense was that first off, he incentivized himself.
Right.
He knew he may have started going to the pool because he wanted to feel better, or he may have started going to the pool because he wanted to start having interactions with real human beings.
Right.
Right. My sense is, so folks are aware. They just need better opportunities. And this whole system creates cascades of interaction. And that's what we're starved for.
Right. So you're saying that the interactivity, the interaction, meeting people who would be good health role models would be the catalyst for something like this.
Well, I don't even think, even though, I've spent an insane amount of attention and action on improving my health during the last 40 years, I don't think that the role models are the key. I think that most ill health is a symptom of something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's a compensation for something else.
Mm-hmm.
The compulsive eating or the not going outside or the whatever is a compensation for something else. And if that something else gets taken care of, people can make radical improvements.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And, what I have thought about in this regard, because people have confronted me with like, dude, there's tons of junkies out there. How are they going to fit into this system? My response is, if everyone has $3 million and can pay for anything they need, they can pay for care that actually improves their situation. And they're no longer, because they're unrestricted, that's one of the principles of our law. They cannot be compelled or coerced or restricted to following a specific medical treatment regime. They can pay the people around them to do the things they really need. Like maybe someone who's really injured and drug addicted just needs a massage every day. Well, if they suddenly have the money to do that, they'll do that for 3 years. And it will support real human services rather than this rubber stamp, cookie cutter, totally detached from outcome medical system that we have currently.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's just recap here for a little bit.
Sure.
So what we're talking about, number one, is we're talking about a socioeconomic model that rewards positive interaction, altruism, and being kind and providing a valuable service, hard skill, soft skill, to others. That's where we start. We have some four guidelines that are part of this, so it's definitively mapped out that these are the things that will take place within this ecosystem. There's the potential to use an embedded app inside of a private group in Telegram that could connect your local community, possibly even transact Now, on top of that, we're layering it with your idea around this lusso, which would be the blockchain value that could be distributed to each person, and then through the amalgamation or the synthesis of all of these things, a culture would begin to emerge out of it that would be uh, more, for lack of a better term, more pH and less acidic, right? Like this is so the is it would it be fair to encapsulate what we've talked about right now to that this would be the relative model that you're uh, putting together?
Yeah, that's most of it. I mean, the only thing I'd add to that is that it's really their commitment to helping each other is the special sauce,
Right.
because we currently can be predated by these forces,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden we flip the switch and say, no, I will stand up for everyone in my community. I
Mhm.
we This is Declaration of Independence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
not just, we're going to help each other. No, we pledge our lives. I will risk my life for you. I will risk my fortune for you. I will
Well,
regain my honor for you by
that's
helping you, rather than letting you get hauled off to the gulag.
well, it was, and that is okay. Well, that's invaluable,
Yeah,
right? That proposition alone is invaluable.
that's the game changer.
Yeah.
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 It, so the help app is key, and the commitment to helping each other.
Hmm.
It's an intentional saying, I, I'm not. I'm no longer alone,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to help. I'm not going to allow other people to be atomized, to
Yeah.
be isolated and predated.
Yeah.
We've got new rules here. We're going to
Yeah.
take care of each other. Period.
Yeah. I like that.
So
That's
that's
great.
yeah,
So we've got your destinations, your Substack and your website.
yeah.
Are you open to people interacting with you and working on this with you and fleshing this thing out?
Absolutely. They can reach out to me through either of those channels. I'd love
Okay.
to do more with folks on this, and I also consult. So
Okay.
if you want
Um, let me go into the comments. Let's see what people have to say, and let's see. Do you guys have any questions for Mo based on everything that he's brought to the table? Any like specific questions that you want to ask of him? I'll go through some of the comments while you're hopefully putting some questions together. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Mhm. There's a lot of interesting conversations going on in chat. Um, mm, let's see. Integrity and karma. I've carried this nominative for about 30 years, having seen enough. It was my way to remind myself to do my best and that the scales would be balanced whether or not it happens in my lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, what else do we have here? Let's see. No questions. Thank you for the insight. Susie G says, frequency matches how we vibrate. We will find our communities.
Oh,
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see. Anybody else? Let's see. Kabuki Theater Bo says, poor health is a result of air, water, food, and medicine. And yeah, money as well.
yeah.
Yeah, people can't afford to buy uh, quality products and have to settle for shit. That contributes to it. Let's see what else. Anybody else? Yeah, man. I think we've covered the bases here. And I'm really happy that you've stopped by and decided to share this with us. And I think it's a really fascinating model. And it's again, it's a solution, right? It's not perfect. Nothing is completely ever baked out. And even if or when it is implemented, we'll put the when in there. I'm sure there's going to be tweaks to the model. And I think what you need is you need a test group. You need a small community to jump in, and maybe that community is virtual, maybe it's terrestrial, maybe it's a combination of the two. But I think that's the next step, right? At some point, you road test these things, and man, I'm excited and I'm looking forward to see where this goes.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You got his details. If you want to find out more, you want to get involved, go spend some time over. And his Substack is great reading. Just in general, you'll get educated. You don't necessarily have to participate in the building of the new arc. You can simply read some of the ideas and thoughts that are being put down into the digital world, and let them come into your system and digest them. So, hey, man, we'll get you back on again, and we'll catch up, and we'll get a progress report, and we'll see how this thing is working out. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for this time together, Robert.
Okay. I love you, my brother.
I love you too.
All right. Take care.
Peace.
All right. That was the great Mo, my buddy from Oregon, and back from the good old days of Mondo 2000. Boy, do we have some stories. All right. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening. I hope you found some of this value. And look, we're in a world that's looking for solutions. We're looking for solutions. We're not just here to shout at the clouds and point our fingers at people and say, "Oh, you're just a member of the uni-party," or it's like this is a positive. This is a positive antidote to the toxicity of the existential woe known as the black pill. All right, I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live. Locals, I left you guys a message over on Locals. I'll be taking care of you guys tomorrow. I'll be spending some time over there. In the meantime, treat each other well. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. And bye for now. Take care.